Hello, everyone. It's really interesting to be sharing this story with you here tonight because of all of the people on the East Coast that are preparing for Hurricane Matthew. It was about 2 years ago that we were packing for a trip to Los Cabos, Mexico, when I saw on the news that there was a hurricane out in the Pacific Ocean. So I said to my husband, Todd, maybe we should think about canceling this trip. And Todd, who's right over there, is not much of a worrier. And he kind of looked at me like I was crazy and said, hurricanes never hit this part of Mexico. They haven't been hit by a hurricane since like 1950. Everything is going to be fine. We're going to have a great time. So we went. And it turns out that while Todd has a ton of amazing skills, weather forecasting is not one of them. No. And we ended up being trapped in the direct path of a Category 4 hurricane. Now this all happened so quickly, there was no way for any of us to get out. And so we ended up riding out the actual hurricane in the basement of the resort with about 300 other guests. After the hurricane went through and they let us out of the basement, we found out that it had destroyed the airport, made all the roads impassable, knocked out all the power and phone service. And because a lot of people were like Todd and didn't think this hurricane was going to come, nobody was prepared. And so looting and violence started. So it was a bad situation. And we ended up being trapped there for 4 days before we could be evacuated. As you can imagine, I had many I told you so moments with Todd about this one. But you know, if I could go back and change history and erase this experience, I don't know that I would. Because it taught me a lot of lessons that I really needed to learn. The hurricane itself was terrifying. Scariest thing I've ever been through in my life. But it was those days after, when we were trapped with all those other people, that taught me so much. It gave me a glimpse into the way a lot of older adults live in traditional institutional senior living environments, where people are telling you what you can and can't do, where you don't have any control and you're completely dependent on other people, and where you experience unbelievable feelings of loneliness and helplessness and boredom. The staff that worked at that resort were a lot like the people at CLC. They were dedicated and caring, and they stayed with us the whole time. But they made it very clear to all of us that our vacation was over. They told us we were no longer guests, but were refugees that had to obey their every command. They locked up every drop of alcohol in the whole place. Not good. They gave us a list of rules we had to follow and scheduled meal times, and they confined us to a small, safe area of the property. And that was my first lesson. What it feels like and what it must feel like to be an older adult moving into an institution. Going from a life of freedom and choices and doing whatever you want, whenever you want to do it. And then realizing you have to trade that freedom in because you need somebody to take care of you. Now again, these team members did the best they could. They found enough rooms for all of us to stay in. There was enough fuel in the generator so we could have power for a couple hours in the morning and at night. They cooked for us. They had security to keep out the looters. So we had shelter and food and people taking care of us. And you'd think that would be enough, but it wasn't. And some really weird things started happening. Things that, now looking back, I realize are eerily similar to what we often see in nursing homes and assisted living and independent living communities. All of us who were trapped at that resort, we were surrounded by other people the whole time. But we were desperately lonely. There was no cell phone service, and we all knew that the cell phone towers were demolished. But we kept carrying our phones around with us everywhere we went anyway. And every few minutes, you'd see somebody holding their phone up to the sky looking for a signal. And I can't tell you how many times that I heard someone say, gosh, I really need to talk to my parents. I wish I could talk to my sister. I really need to talk to my kids. And the resort staff did their very best to keep us updated on what was going on. They met with us every morning, and they said, "We are in contact with the Mexican authorities. We don't know when you're going to get out of here, but please know we're working on it. As soon as we know something, we'll tell you at our next update meeting. Please stop bothering us and asking us. We have other things to take care of." And we couldn't accept that. We went up to the staff. Every time we saw one of the staff members, we'd run up and say, "I need to go home. When can I go home?" And if you spent time in senior living, especially in a nursing home, I'm guessing this is starting to sound kind of familiar. Those things we hear people say. We also experienced unbelievable feelings of helplessness. And I tried to fight those feelings of helplessness by going up to the staff and offering to help. So I then went up to them and I said, "Hey, I really need to do something here. Can I help you? I plan for emergencies at work. Can I do something? Anything. Give me a job." And they kind of smiled at me and patted my hand and said, "Thank you so much for offering to help. We don't need your help. We got this." Other people tried to help by picking up shovels to clean up the debris and the glass that was everywhere in this resort. And within minutes, the general manager ran out and screamed, "Stop! You can't do that. It's not safe." And the guests, refugees, said, "We really need to do something to make us feel like we're making the situation better. Please let us help. Can we sign a waiver or something?" And the manager said, "Absolutely not. My insurance and risk management policies would never allow that to happen. We don't want you to get hurt." And this is what plays out so often in traditional senior living, where people are desperate for an opportunity for real purpose, and we're afraid of getting sued or violating a regulation or somebody getting hurt, and we take that away from them. And all of us at the resort knew that we weren't allowed to leave our little safe area, and that was actually pretty dangerous out there. But we kept trying to escape. We would wait until the staff turned their backs, and then we'd run off to the beach or the golf course, only to be hauled back time and time again by the staff. We wanted to see what was out there. But more importantly, it doesn't matter how old you are or what danger there is. None of us want to be told where we can and can't go and what we can and can't do. And it is human nature to fight back against that. So the staff tried to find some things for us to do to keep us out of trouble, keep us from running away. So they brought out some card games and board games. And as you can imagine, very few people use them. I actually tried to play a game of cards one day with a group of people. And I realized I could not get my brain to work enough to play rummy. And I understand now. When we take away people's control over their own lives and take away opportunities for real meaning and purpose, it's crazy to think that we can replace that with a board game or entertainment or bingo. And like people living in an institution, our meal times took on great importance for us. Now, in a senior living setting, it's not uncommon to see residents lined up outside the dining room an hour before a meal starts. Well, that was us. Lunch was scheduled at 1 o'clock every day. And by 11:30, Todd and I would be sitting in our room, and we'd look at each other and say, "We should probably head down there. At least there's people there. Maybe something interesting will happen. There's nothing else to do." And I think I actually used to believe, somewhere in my head, that when you get older, you just need to be places earlier. And you need to eat earlier. But that's not it. When we see people doing things like that, it means that they're bored out of their minds and unable to find other types of meaning in their day. Often, well, sometimes in a nursing home, there'll be a resident who comes into the dining room with her purse and grabs sugar and crackers and stuffs them in there. and then she takes it back to her room and hides it. That was me. I did that. I stole bread, and I stole crackers, and I stole anything else I could get my hands on. I was a food hoarder. And I was told once, and I believed it for all these years, that people did that because they lived through the Depression. I believed that. I did not live through the Depression. I hoarded food because I had some voices inside my head that I think are similar to the voices that woman in the nursing home is hearing. One voice saying, food's only available at scheduled meal times. What are you going to do if you get hungry at midnight? And another voice, a scarier voice, saying, you have no control, and you are completely dependent on other people. What are you going to do if they don't come through for you tomorrow? Like that woman who steals crackers and sugar, it's just a desperate attempt to regain some control over something really basic in your life. Like when you eat. What happened in this situation is that all of us who were trapped at that resort were institutionalized in a frighteningly short period of time by well-meaning, kind people who were just trying to take care of us. We all had really different reactions to that loneliness and helplessness and boredom that we felt. How do you think you would respond? We met a woman who was also hoarding food, and one night she became so upset and agitated that she started throwing food around the room, screaming at her boyfriend, and then ran out in the middle of the night. She was a petite little thing, and she was fighting so hard that it took 2 security guards to drag her back. Another man was angry and upset and belligerent, yelling at the staff, and tried to get the rest of us to join him in a forceful overthrow of management. Todd dealt with the situation by sleeping. Yep. 90 degrees, no air conditioning. The man slept just about the whole time. That was the way he knew to escape a situation he didn't want to be in. I, on the other hand, couldn't sleep at all. And I couldn't even sit still. I was anxious, upset, and I paced the whole time. I also started losing track of the days and losing track of time. One day, someone asked me what time it was. And I looked at my watch and I said, it's 9:30. Without a doubt in my mind that it was 9:30 in the morning and that we had had breakfast not too long ago. It was actually 3:30 in the afternoon, and I completely lost part of a day. Now, if we were in our 80s instead of our 40s and living in a traditional institutional setting, we would have been labeled as having behaviors, and we would have had diagnoses and treatments assigned to us. I would have been diagnosed with an anxiety disorder, with hoarding tendencies, and the early stages of dementia. Todd would have been diagnosed as being depressed. And the woman who was throwing food and the man who was trying to overthrow management, they'd be on antipsychotic medications. Wouldn't that be absolutely ridiculous? To label, diagnose, and medicate people when all they're doing is reacting to the situation they're living in? This is what happens and continues to happen to thousands and thousands of older adults all across our country. And you know, the ones that are acting out and have behaviors, who are maybe trying to overthrow management, they're the ones that still have some fight left in them, who are trying to tell us, I don't want to live this way. And there are countless others that have stopped fighting, decided that life really isn't worth living. And those are the ones that you see in a nursing home slumped over in their wheelchair, asking why hasn't God taken me yet? This isn't how older adults should live. And that's why we are working so hard on changing this with Christian Living Communities and Capella Living Solutions. You know, when Todd and I finally were evacuated and we got back home, and I went back to work, my first day at Claremont Park, I walked in the front door, and my friend Ray Hogan was sitting there. For those of you who didn't have the opportunity to know Ray, that guy was one in a million. And he had a lot of purpose and a lot of different roles at that community. One of the most important roles he had to me was that he was a great friend to all of us. So he was just the guy I needed to see after this ordeal. So I walked in the front door. Ray reaches up from his wheelchair and grabs me and hugs me. And he said, "Kid, I'm so glad you're home. I spent all last week trying to hire a helicopter to rescue you." And after I stopped sobbing, it hit me that this is what a life worth living is about. Relationships, community, meaning. And this work that's being done by Christian Living Communities to throw out that institutional model and instead focus on possibilities and growth and what's great about aging. That's the most important work we can do. Thank you, all of you, every one of you in here, for being a part of that work. In helping us to create environments where people thrive, rather than just waiting out the days until they can be rescued and taken home. Thank you.